No, you're actually a little bit. So, I'm gonna like, you can tell everybody's masked all the time.
Okay, I see.
Even though I can't put my glasses on. So,
So could you turn the camera around so I can see the class?
you got it. One of those things.
The wall just doesn't do the class justice.
Well, I was gonna point it at Simmone, you know, but we'll see how that goes. All right.
Good to hear my voice. We work together all the time. We know how to work with each other.
Oh, I'm gonna turn this on, so say something.
Hello.
Well, why-
Oh, hello.
all right, so why don't you turn it down?
Fix it for me. I mean, who they call? I called him boss man for 11 years.
So,
I think it's good to hear now.
yes.
Okay.
All right. Sam is here now, way over there. So let's, with this. So, can you see everybody real well still? DeKeither, you still see everybody?
Yeah, let's see everyone.
All right, well, why don't we get started? We have technology, which is so far. Monkey, you want to stand over on this side, so I can introduce you. And DeKeither. So everybody, this is our. All right, this is Saturday Live. This is our class on water justice. As you know, what Representative Sampson, like what we got know, we started this environmental law and policy survey course, and we started off talking about the history of environmental justice movement and how there's been systemic racism involved throughout. We're covering Clean Water Act now, yeah, and some of the cleanup statutes later on. In covering the Clean Water Act, we want to make sure we have every permanent to talk about the systemic racism that's inherent in that law and inherent in the areas the law is supposed to address. So we talk about an area, we're talking about cleanups and other things. It kind of comes in all the way through. So we want to have a specific class look at case studies of water injustice. Environmental racism is relates to water, and environmental justice is relates to water. And we've been talking about each law for the class, talking about each law as a standalone thing. So we also talked earlier about how the problems that create the causes of environmental racism and environmental injustice are not specific just to environmental laws. They're there to Clean Water Act and air. They're there, but the causes and solutions are so much broader than that. And we talked a little about Detroit, which comes up here again, and we discussed this before, how systemic disinvestment, disenfranchisement, and discrimination go way beyond the environmental realm. If it fits the environmental justice, the solutions go way beyond environmental statutes, much less the Clean Water Act. With that said, we're looking at water justice. We're learning about the Clean Water Act, so to the extent it ties in, we should think about that. So that's the broad intro. Now I'm going to introduce two people who can really talk about that, relating not just to one case study in Jackson, Mississippi, but throughout the country. First, I'm going to introduce Simmone Lightfoot. Simmone is
Good to see you.
class. Simmone is the Vice President, Associate Vice President of Environmental Justice and Climate Justice for the National Wildlife Federation. Simmone and I worked together for, a dozen years now. And when Simmone was the environmental justice, the first real environmental justice staff person for the National Wildlife Federation in Great Lakes. Before that, Simmone was the political director for the Detroit branch of the NAACP, which is the largest NAACP branch in the country and has been for many years. She ran the mayoral campaign, successful mayoral campaign for Mayor Mark Mallard of Cincinnati, the first African American mayor of Cincinnati, and has a long pedigree of incredible community activism and political activism. She's an Air Force vet, and she works now all over the country, in communities and with communities, from the streets to the suites, your phrase, to elevate water justice issues, amplify their voices, and to help create solutions. So that's a really long intro because I know a lot about Simmone. She is, until last year, she was a member of the Honor School. Representative DeKeither Stance, I know Representative Stance a lot less about you, but what I read is incredibly impressive. State representative from the Jackson, Mississippi area, former city council member from Jackson, and before that, multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq with the Marines and the Army, Army cadet and a Marine together, and I think that's pretty rare. So thank you for your service, Representative DeKeither, and Representative Stance, and take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Andy is so modest, he doesn't like me to talk about him, but he brought me into the National Wildlife Federation. I went from the blackest organization, the NAACP, to the whitest organization. And he put a hedge of protection around me for about 11 years, and literally kind of did this, and as they were hitting at me, because I was pushing on race issues, he would just kind of turn his body and block for me all the time, and he'd always go find money for me because there wasn't a budget. I just had my credit card, I'd wrap it up, and he'd find the money, and we did that for 11 years, and it really built the foundation of the work we're doing now at the Federation. And so you can't talk about environmental justice at the National Wildlife Federation without talking about Andy Hudspeth, period, case closed. He had a vision, he was very direct, he said, I have an all-white staff. He said that to me, I'm like, I like you just talk straight, I love that. And so we worked well together in the Great Lakes region, and then he made sure I moved to our national director before he left, and then even before that, he made sure I was associate vice president before he left, and so he's just done a yeoman's job and very intentional about race, and that's so important. We're at a time now, you can't sugarcoat it, you can't act like it's not the elephant in the room if you want to be relevant and if you want to be authentic in the work. It calls for that. And so do the people on the ground, they call for that because they will call you out, and they will call you out in a big way. Now it's TikTok and memes, and you ask the mayor, the state rep, those of us who had to run for elective office, it's quite vicious. Right now, it's really hard. It takes a certain type of person, and so I'd love to encourage any of you to consider running for elective office. We have drain commissioners that are needed as it relates to water in our area anyway, but all the way up to Congress, Senate, wherever you'd like to go. So we do need good people willing to serve. The rest of you, we need you doing good work in those courtrooms and in those briefs and in those other places and spaces that you are as it relates to justice and water. And it's so important you guys bring these competencies to the table. We have so many people inside the workplace now where we're trying to retrain, if you will, on these cultural competencies, because if you lack them, it puts an undue burden on the Black and brown staff to have to supplement what you don't know, and you still get to stay in charge, you still get to write the checks, and you don't know. And so that's hard work. We struggle with retention in this space, particularly for Black people. Brown people, Brown does a little better. Asian Pacific Islanders, little bit. We're struggling to find Asian Pacific Islander community folk who are interested in this space. Literally, we're the same thing when we were at the school board. We were trying to find Asian Pacific Islander teachers, and that just wasn't necessarily a profession that we found when we hit college campuses and career fairs where folk were in those spaces. And so we need Black and brown competencies, lenses that they look at things. We have a lot of linear thinkers, people who just can only do this, straight ahead, just straight. I used to say when I came to the National Wildlife Federation, do you all talk to the NAACP? And the response I got was, well, we don't have a grant for that. That was fascinating to me. Fascinating. That one, you get to work on stuff that you're funded for. Who gets to do that? Like, wow. I think NAACP, we work on everything on Schuster. The other piece is that the thought was that we do what the grant said. There wasn't the notion of human to human. Let me just call you, have lunch with you and see what you all are doing. How can we get to know you? And so we need people comfortable going into the unknown. State Representative Stamps can tell you about that as a former Marine, myself as Air Force. I have no problem going into the unknown. You tell me the mission and what we need to pull out, whether it's from the streets or the suites. You need the mayor, you need the county commission, you need the grassroots community, send me. I have no problem doing that. And you don't have to send me a bunch of times. You send me and I'm gonna make some friends the first time, and then from then on, we're gonna be rocking and rolling. But we need people comfortable doing that kind of work. I'm gonna stop a little bit because I wanna bring the state representative in here to talk about whatever he'd like to talk about. But he will touch on the water challenges that they are facing there in Jackson, Mississippi. Mayor Tope Lumumba put out a public cry early March, and he was asking for help. And we at the organization tended to think we should send a truckload of water. You know what you do? Every time there's a water crisis, we send a truckload of water. I said, wait a minute, why don't we ask people? Why don't we just ask people what they need? Well, they didn't, the relationships weren't necessarily there. They were concentrated in our EJ space. Pick up the phone call, hey, what y'all need? You need some water? No more. He said, no, this is another record deal. But bring these other things. And he helped compile a list of things that they needed on the ground. I took that list back to our folk, and we began to try to put some resources in those spaces. And I'm always talking resources. I do well with crumbs. One thing people will do, they'll say, oh, it's the end of the year, and I only got a couple $1,000. I know it's nothing. I'm like, give it to me. I rack up dollars getting folks leftover money and put them in places like WNPR, Black radio station, 100,000 watts, the only one in the country, cover 5 states. And it's amazing what we've been able to do. We get to talk to Mississippi, and he'll tell us all the 5 states up the Mississippi River that we get to engage. But that was new for National Wildlife. Now I'm having them get into social media influencers, where we're putting that in the budget, and we're going to pay some of these young folk who really TikTok and do all this stuff in the green space. I'm looking at micro influencers though, because some of them, they got a following. The money is off the chain. We have a young man we interviewed. He's at Yale. He was studying engineering. He said he's going full time, $30,000 a month he does, and he's not even out of college yet. And so when we start talking about that kind of money, it's obscene, isn't it? It's amazing. Especially for a gray hair like me, $30,000. That's a lot. But we are looking to enlist those young people to help message. National Wildlife can be kind of stodgy in what people think of it. They don't see us as this cool place. They see us as protecting the animals, and that's great, the wildlife. But we got some cool stuff going on too that we do, and so we really want to be more relevant in broader spaces. Old white men are not enough to hold up the organization, nor is cat ladies, right? We need them, they're important, but we need to grow, and we know that as an organization. And so we headed to Mississippi a while ago, down to Jackson, and I've been there ever since. And anything I need, I reach out to the state representative. I will say this last thing, I promise. He was the city councilman and the sitting state rep at the same time, which is, I always say, that's leftover slavery kind of stuff, right? Can you imagine being a slave and your city councilman is also your state rep? So getting relief through your local political channels isn't necessarily, like he gets to play golf with the governor and then come back and be on, like that is unique. It's very unique, and now we have Black people that are able to take advantage of those old laws that were set up totally differently. And so he just finished serving in both roles in April, and now he's full-time just in the legislature. So I will stop and turn it over to State Representative DeKeither Stans.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor and privilege to spend a little time with you this evening. I've been really looking forward to it. I thought about going to law school at one time, but my life journey took me in a different direction. So it's definitely an honor and a privilege to spend a little time, share a little bit about myself, and learn from you, more importantly. Thank you to the faculty and staff there for opening this space and conversation up, and definitely to Simmone. She's just a ball of fire. She's always doing something to help people to move forward on a journey. She said a little bit about me. I did serve in the military, but I grew up on a little small farm in a little small town called Learned, Mississippi. Now, I'm sure you may have heard of it, because it's all a whopping population of 108, and probably more people on your hall than in my hometown. And we had a great hometown. I love growing up in a small town, large farming community. We've been farming here in Mississippi since before there was an America. So we've enjoyed the entire American experience from, there were Black Indians, Native Americans, quote unquote. And so our family has been enjoying the whole American experience from before and still going forward and going strong. But right now, again, I serve as a state representative, and I've been working with Ms. Lightfoot and National Wildlife Federation to stabilize our situation here in Mississippi. So like she said, when she called and said, hey, y'all need to send an 18-wheeler full of water, I was like, no, I'm trying to save a radio station, because as you know, media is very important when it comes to communicating with people, helping to organize folks. Well, if you can't communicate with them, how do you help move people forward? And the radio is the most accessible way to reach people on the other side of the digital divide. That's kind of what we specialize in. I know a lot of folks focus on social media, and we do that to a degree, but our primary focus is to be that bridge to get in touch with people who are not on this side of the digital divide, and to just communicate with everyone, to share good information of how we can move our communities forward. Specifically, when it comes to the water issue situation here in Jackson, Mississippi, and several other places. I know a lot of times we talk about race and how race plays a role, but I look at it like a bulldozer. Race would be that shield on the front of the bulldozer, but classism is that driving engine that pushes that shield and plows through things. So we can't necessarily just talk about race and not talk about classism, because there are folks in the Black race that are in a different class that enjoy a higher quality of life than anybody else. So we have to talk about classism as well in this environmental justice and specifically water justice conversation as we move forward. And we've been through a lot of ups and downs over the last few years when it comes to our climate issues, water issues, environmental issues. So I look forward to a spirited conversation today. I'll hand it back over to Simmone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andy. So we can go to questions. Is that
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the Jackson area?
Well, Jackson and Benton Harbor. Listen, I was in Benton Harbor this weekend. We got it right here at home. We were in Benton Harbor, Michigan. They can't drink their water and haven't been able to for about 3 years now. And so it was pressure. One thing I talk about in politics, they've been calling and says, Simmone, you can't drink this water, you can't drink this water. And so they were going through their motions for a few years. And they finally filed a petition with the EPA. The September 9th, they did it, and all heck broke loose. The governor went to scrambling, the state airmen went to scrambling, and I told them, in politics, if you don't make noise, you get to stay on a radar. A radar, you're on the radar, we're working on it. As money comes, as opportunity comes, we'll look at it. If you don't rattle the cage, particularly in this day and age, you're gonna have some trouble literally getting heard. And so when they filed that petition with the EPA, all heck broke loose. We got involved. We went on the ground. We put Mustafa Dr. Ali on it. We did an op-ed on it. We put our machine in motion. We're putting the talking points. We're getting those things that we need, toolkits and all those kind of things to help people. We don't have money, right? But Simmone don't operate like that. If I operated in that, I said, well, we're the largest conservation organization in the country, but we don't have any money for you. That's not how. I've had a relationship with Reverend Pinckney and Benton Harbor for years. I'm not gonna not hear and not be a part of. I have a team that I get to command and marshal. We have a small budget that I get to play around with. We have a visionary at the helm. And so with no money, we got busy putting together the assets that we have within the organization to work, even the social media, even our web pages. As I said, our op-eds, we have media friends that we can call and pitch stories, and they pick them right up. And I know you know this, you don't open the paper and just see stories, right? Y'all know they get pitched, right? Y'all know when there's a crescendo, when every story is dealing with one particular topic, you go, oh, okay, somebody put some money out there. That's how it's happening. We're dealing with that now with the federal legislature. Legislation is moving. We're getting resources coming in because a lot of people with money are trying to make sure that their grain of sand gets in reconciliation. And I talk about it as a grain of sand. You pick up all the issues, you know, something's going to fall out, right? Sand, it's going to fall out of your hand. And folks are trying to be in Nancy's hands. They want their issue to make it over the finish line. So they come to folks like us, the National Wildlife Federation, who are lovers, not fighters. I say that all the time. National NAACP was fighters. Sierra Club, sometimes fighters. But National Wildlife, we love people. And we need lovers too. And we convene people and bring them together. And we work up the middle of the aisle. And we're one of the only groups that can talk to Republicans and Democrats in real high tension times there on the Hill. And while we don't get our way, it would be so much worse than some of this legislation. People weren't pushing and prodding and adding money to line items. And so Big Harbor's next on our list. The governor announced today, a few hours ago, I got the email that she's a task force queen. Boy, every time it's the problem, the governor got a task force. But put together a group of 7 people. And so I would expect that the National Wildlife Federation in some way would be in our Great Lakes team anyway, would weigh in on who should be part of that 7. And those are the kind of things that we get to have say and sway about. So from policy to the way teams are put together. So that's Benton Harbor. We're in Birmingham, Alabama as well. And we're there under 4 domains. We're doing natural infrastructure, we're doing flooding, we're doing water, and we're doing public health down in Birmingham. So we're there 24 months. President just finishing up in March.
What are the problems you're working on?
The problems with flooding, and so they have a big flooding issue in Birmingham. Aged infrastructure, as you know, low-lying space, and so flooding is huge right now in Birmingham, especially. There was a thunderstorm watch a couple yesterday. I think today too. They have some really bad weather down there. That the way they built some of the cul-de-sacs are kind of a challenge because that U shape. When you think of cul-de-sac, there's a U usually in there, but whoever's house is at that U. You catch it. Not only you catch the water, particularly the pitch in the concrete isn't right, and your sewer system is receiving that. They have struggled with litter, believe it or not, and that litter is huge because it'll block them drains up so quick, and now you got flooding all over the streets. So flooding from climate-induced flooding from waste and litter, and so putting litter programs in place, cleanup programs, summer internship opportunities. We created a couple of years ago this summer green work experience for young people down there. We just finished our 2nd year this year to see those young people involved in being good stewards of their community through our work is just rich. And we also introduced them to transportation infrastructure this year. They're having the World Games come to Birmingham, Alabama, later this year or early next year. They're having it. And so watching and taking the kids on site where the transportation hubs were being built and the facilities, and it was just awesome to expose them to that kind of work. So public health was big there in Alabama. As you know, the COVID numbers are still not where we would like to see them at all. And then public health, natural infrastructure, water, and flooding. So water sewer rates are off the charts in Birmingham, Alabama. If you look up that case, there was some suits and both went to jail, some big messing around going on, and now the city is on the hook for a whole lot of money with the sewer system. So the bills are higher for sewage than the water itself. And so working on affordability is a part of our work there as well. So those are 3 that so we're in New Orleans, and we're in the Lower Ninth Ward. We've been there for years. We keep partners. If I work with you, my partner forever. I danced with the guy who took me to the dance, right? It doesn't matter who else is there today. If you took me to the dance, I'm gonna dance with you. I'm gonna make sure you're whole. Even if I find another partner I want to get with, I'm gonna still make sure you're good. You're gonna eat good. You're still gonna get drinks sent over to you. I'm gonna take care of you because you took care of me, and I believe in that. And so I'll stop and let the state rep, I mean, those are three cities that come off the top of my head that we're for, that we're working on in water. Representative, you want to touch on Jackson's water challenges or issues or that?
Yeah, so the disinvestment that happens that you spoke about earlier happens, roughly, well, tragically in our community as well. Since about 1990, the city of Jackson has had about $1.5 billion of disinvestment. And folks, take their assets and businesses and things like that and move to different areas. And what has to happen to solve that is there has to be an economy built inside of our community to help sustain the community going forward versus other areas profiting off of our economy. We have to get more economic rollover when it comes to the resources that are produced here. And Jackson's unique because, that's why I wanted to talk about class and race when it comes to dealing with these issues. And even inside the Black community, you have a big classism issue that you have to deal with when it comes to serving underserved areas or dividing the pie, so to speak, amongst when you're in a room where your city council is majority Black and your school board is majority Black and your Hines County Board of Supervisors is majority Black and most of your representation is majority Black. So we're at a unique point that's a little deeper than just the normal race issues you deal with. You have to deal with classism within your own community. Folks who say, well, if we have a pie, the majority of the pie needs to go over here versus get divided up equally amongst all 114 square miles of the city. Some folks want to concentrate the pie in one area and then everyone else have to divide up the crumbs. So those are the kinds of issues that we've had to deal with, which lead us to the point where we live in today, which caused our crisis to happen. The city freezes over. Well, whose side of the city gets no water? The one that's been continually disinvested in when it comes to repair work, new sewer lines, water lines, infrastructure, innovative ideas when it comes to natural infrastructure and making those types of investments in certain areas. So our challenge is a little bit deeper here, but I'm happy to say we're moving forward. We're going to continue to push forward and work through them. But our progress in working through them is starting to happen on the horizon because we've deepened or elevated the conversation beyond just race, but added the class conversation into it too, because there is a responsibility of Black leadership to provide appropriate services for Black people. We cannot absolve Black leaders from making bad decisions and making decisions that weren't for the good of the whole when you're in charge. I don't let any leader be left unaccountable, white or Black. I think that's part of what I learned growing up, first and foremost, but even in the military, if you have a responsibility to provide services for people and you don't, even if no matter what color you are, you get the same heat as everyone else. And I love my dear brother, Shokwe Lumumba to death. We're friends. I was just texting him a minute ago, but my neighbor, I'm looking at my living room window right now, and my neighbor has sewer in their yard. So our issues that we have to deal with, we have to hold all leaders accountable, not just ones of different parties or different races. Every leader that's in the chain, if this is your responsibility, do your job. Kind of like the old adage of Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, when they say, do your job. That's kind of how I roll when it comes to politics and work and dividing resources up. What is your job? Do your job. And if it took us 40, 50, 100, or 400 years to get here, it's going to take double that to get out. Just know we're on a journey towards getting better, but it all starts with accountability at every level of government and everybody.
Can you touch on the fact that you are in the capital city?
Mm-hmm.
The Capitol sits there, your legislators come into work and then drive back out of Jackson as you all face all of those water challenges.
Well, what I would say is that Mississippi has to evolve above Neanderthal philosophy. And if we can evolve above Neanderthal thinking, Neanderthal politics, we can move forward. Our young people are not leaving Mississippi. Well, they're leaving Mississippi because they want to have an urban center. You know, what you see in my background here, that's the city of Jackson. You know, it looks like a vibrant city, nice picture. But the underpinnings is eroding. But if the state continues to invest and think that these young folks, y'all want a condo and a coffee shop. Y'all don't want a new subdivision. You want a high rise. You want those things that happen in an urban environment. And if the state of Mississippi does not invest in its only urban center, it's going to continue to lose population because young folks want what they see on TV. They can't just watch Friends and not want that. They can't just watch, these other TV shows that show people living in urban centers. So in one vein, Jackson, Mississippi is the saving grace for the state of Mississippi. It's its only urban center. So regionally, Mississippi will not be able to compete for population or economy if it does not create an urban center. So Mississippi's solution is its capital city. People leave here and, I have a daughter in San Antonio because she wants to live with 7 million people. I have a son in Florida, in the Navy. So, our young people want what normal young people want. They want that urban feel. They want to be able to just live, work, and play and go to the coffee shop and run back up to their condo and have the little dog. But they don't want the big dog like she has at home. I got 2 big Great Pyrenees. They're 150 pounds apiece. She wants a little bitty teacup dog. That's what young folks want. So in order to build Mississippi going forward, we're going to have to change the philosophy and really build an urban center so that our state can compete inside the region.
Good job. Questions?
Let me ask one more, Representative Stance. We read about, the water crisis, we read about the lack of water, the flow of water advisories, the bottled water, we read about the lead contamination, potentially some the sewer overflows. And that's a whole chunk of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the last article we read was March. Is there been progress since then? Is there a strategy or some of it? To be without water for weeks or months or even days is really difficult. And it takes years to redress that. That's or really something. So, what's the status of the
What's the status of the recovery?
Yeah. So let's divide those up. One of the major issues we had was we had flooding. We had a huge flood, 100-year flood about 2.5 years ago. And to date, in certain areas, the issues that caused that flooding have been remediated. But in the areas where you have folks at a different class, those issues have not been remediated. When it comes to the water crisis, what I championed for during the recent water crisis we had was to build water towers in the underserved areas. Jackson's water system, if you could kind of visualize it, the northeast side of town is where the Pearl River is, and our water plant is at the northeast side of town. So it's way over here. Let me move the screen. So it's way at this corner. But the majority of the population lives on this side of town and in the south portion. So where the folks who didn't have water was because you were the furthest distance from the plant. And so simple solution in my country boy thinking was, okay, well, we need to build some water towers in the other side of town. But they're trying to prove a model that's not been proven. Can we produce water over here and pump it across this many miles to get over here. And when weather's good, you can. But when weather's bad and there's a break somewhere inside the distribution system, then all these people have no water. So to date, the city nor the state has even moved on the common sense idea of water towers in these areas that are far away. We even found out that the few water towers that we had didn't have any water in them, prior to the storm. And so I said, well, okay, country boy thinking kicks in gear again. A little bit of my Marine thinking kicks in. So, okay, now, all right, so if the water towers are empty, what service is necessary that you would do when your tower is empty? Do you clean it? Do you do any internal service work? Let's go ahead and get that done while it's empty so that when you fill it up, it'll be serviceable going forward. The leadership at the time and still today, they just wanted to rush to fill them back up with water to get them back in service. So you're gonna have to wait till it's empty again to do that service that had been deferred already. So those are the kinds of things that we have to push through. And it takes additional investment, but you got to have folks in place that said, you know what, this makes sense. Let's do it and let's move forward. So it just takes a little bit of common sense and political will. And so we have to fight through that classism issue that we're dealing with that hides behind the shield of racism.
It does. There is a disdain I found, Andy, at some levels of government. There's a disdain for people. There really is. I mean, there's this notion of, well, they shouldn't have them kids, or they shouldn't have divorced, or they shouldn't have moved there, or why don't they move? They're really, the love shown for poor people tends to be shown at the time a grant is being applied for, because then they write about the fence line, the front line communities. When a narrative is being put together, they talk about it in the proper context. But being about it, actually doing the work and servicing those spaces, they're used to get the resources. They don't become the recipients necessarily of those resources. And it's one of those things I fuss with at the office all the time. I tell my team, don't put jobs, put entrepreneur business opportunities. Black people get told about jobs coming and they never show up, whether it's a stadium coming, whether it's a marine, whatever it is. There's this narrative that always says, and jobs. But they don't talk about the training that's necessary. They don't talk about where the training is placed. If it's placed out in the suburbs and off of a public transportation line, that's a problem for the folks that are there. We see now in Detroit, they're building a tech center. The unions have finally got it. The unions was a challenge. Labor has been a challenge to some of our progress as well. It's the good old boy network that works in the labor industry. Black people have had an opportunity to have a great middle class and upper middle class life in labor. So I don't want to negate that reality. However, when you look at it and you peel back, there's still challenges with race and supporting issues that are predominant in poor communities. So we just have a mighty work to do. And last thing I said, we need you all. And one of the things my mayors are facing across the country is talent. There's a lack of talent in this water space. And so Mayor Cantrell out of New Orleans, for example, when she came into office, when she came into office, she had to contend with old job descriptions. And they wrote these job descriptions for the water department folk, but they also had to have a medical background, these folks. And so where do you find that? She had to go and find a gentleman, 78 years old, bring him out of retirement to fill out her cabinet until she could find that talent or get the job descriptions rewrote and broken apart. When I think about Mayor Weaver out of Flint, it was that dual dance between EPA for them to release the money for Flint, for the level where you need to have these credentials in your water department. So she went out looking for all this stuff the EPA had put down saying these people had to be proficient in, and she came back, she said, first of all, I don't know why they exist like that, that's one. Two, they're at 200 minimum salary. You're giving me $140,000, isn't it? Well, they told her, well, you better find somebody, then you get your money. Well, I can't find somebody, I need the money. Well, you better find somebody. It was just this back and forth. And so We absolutely need talent in the water space. And we also need you to have a little political acumen about yourself, because you may want to do something, but the timing is wrong. It's so interesting to find really smart, wonky types who are right on the issue, wrong on their timing. They come and they want to insist that the mayor takes on X when she up for re-election. This ain't the time for that. And so you gotta have, or it's helpful to have, some political smarts too, as you're putting together the timing and the packaging and the narration, all those things to help the leadership that's in place that's doing good work stay there, in addition to writing a check. So I'll stop. Any questions I'm supposed to take?
Let me ask you both about the lead. Jackson across the country, starts to stack over and over again. Flint was a little difference that's happening for years before that happened in so many different communities. What do you see happening nationally to address red boards and red cards? What do you think? What's happening, Jackson?
Thank you. I'll be brief. It's in the Build Back Better. You know, lead service line replacement is deep down in the policy. I'm concerned if y'all watching. We started with $3 trillion, 3.5, and now they're talking about getting ready for half of that. So again, that sand, there's a whole lot of sand gonna get dropped out of folks' hands, and we're concerned that EJ tends to be one of those things that gets gutted. It wouldn't drop it ideally altogether, because they still need something they can say, particularly for midterms. If Democrats don't deliver, I'm telling you, on voting and on this infrastructure, it's gonna be hard getting folk motivated to get out to midterm elections, right? And then what does that mean? We're only a vote away in one spot, 3 in another, kind of. We gotta hold on to what we have, but the Dems have got to deliver, and they're so like herding cats. I mean, one thing about Republicans, I worked under John Ingram when I was a staffer in the legislature. He did not play. Y'all might not remember John Ingram. Y'all look young. He was our governor. Man, he was bold. I mean, he did not play. He could shut down session, call all the Republicans into that caucus cloakroom to sit over in the corner of the legislature. And when them bad boys came out, they all voted. Ding, ding, ding. He knew how to rally, and he would tell them, you're going to either vote the right way or you're going to get primaried, which means when you go for re-election, you don't have somebody right against you. They will be financed very well. They will get all the narrative that they need from the local media. We're going to make sure of that. And we're going to pull you off all your committees. You ain't going to be on no more committees. You ain't going to have mailing privileges to communicate to your district no more. I mean, he laid that out. Democrats don't do that. They don't play hardball. I'm a military girl. I have no problem doing softball and softball work. But I have no problem going bold. That's the way you move things. And so I'm just concerned about how nice we are and how willing we are to acquiesce to all this stuff when people work hard to deliver. For us, it just concerns me. Democracy is really hanging by a thread. It's very fragile right now. So back to the question on lead. It's in there if we can move this legislation. The challenge we're facing though at the federal level, Donald Trump gutted federal agencies. Let's be very clear. People who had a scintilla of when people left, right? They retired, they moved, they got out of there. Or he fired them. He had them moving. And so even when we got the House, one of the things at the Senate and the presidency, the thing we learned was people who do permitting, open jobs, tons of jobs. So they were calling us, because Dr. Ali worked there 25 years before coming to us, trying to get staff, yeah, names, resumes. We need to like a mass hiring. And that wasn't just EPA, that was DOJ, that was Department of Interior, that was Department of Ag. They were vicious in the last administration on what they did for environmental justice, water, air kind of issues. And so we had to realize that even though we had friends in those places, there was too many vacancies for us to move anything. So what we thought we were going to be able to get rolling right away, we ended up having to wait several months before they could get staffed up. And so all of those things matter. And what happens now that you're trying to hold on to what we have, I would say it's like a cake that's not fully baked. They're trying to get through the system to get the votes out of Congress. But usually you get hearings and you try to get you some amendments in there. They're just moving it, trying to get those votes they need. So a lot of half-baked cakes are moving to the agencies to then put back in the oven and finish baking. So we need to be advocating at the agency level so that they are interpreting the language coming out of the legislature that they have a lot of purview over. They get to interpret mayor, muster, shall, all that. We need to be in their ear pushing them like lawyers do telling them what the definition should be. That's important. We don't want to leave them to their own understanding about what the language should be. We also need to do that same thing at the gubernatorial level. Because that language is moving through fast and it's not fully baked, these governors are going to have a lot of power on how things get interpreted, how money is going to move, and that's important for us to be in our governors here and in our agencies. Congress is cool, I mean, we can, but that stuff moving so fast, I mean, it's hard to get some things through. So that's where the advocacy this time around, I will see quite a bit, I think. So Representative Nance, go right ahead on lead.
So, when it comes to lead, one of our bigger issues that caused one of our major lead outbreaks, it was when I was on the city council, and specific, it came up in my ward, is that when the city changed its corrosion control system and the additives responded differently in some of our more aging infrastructure, and then boom, here you are with a lead issue that's outside of the parameters of safety. So again, when decisions are made, those experts need to be Johnny on the spot, identifying, what will be the cause. If you make this change, this is going to be the total effect on the whole system. One of our deeper issues, and Simmone kind of alluded to it, was we have to reignite a spirit of public service. Public sector jobs and private sector jobs, salary-wise, have never been at a point to compete. But public sector jobs are important and public service is important. So some of these positions that are needed, some of these skill sets that are needed inside of the public sector, the system is not designed for them to be comparable when it comes to pay if you were in the private sector for a similar type position. Even though public sector retirement is good for a middle-class family to live on and retire from. So one of our biggest draws across the country, and specifically in Jackson, is igniting a spirit of public service where people want to, make this a lifestyle and make it a career to be a school teacher, police officer, public works person, sewer operator, street cleaner. Those are honorable professions that you can build a family around that profession, but the actual pay portion, like in the city, our folks who work in the sewer department or the drainage department don't make a lot of money. And one of our biggest successes that we had that's led to a small uptick in people retaining those positions is while I was on the council, we got our investments to the right space where we paid for the insurance. And so now you have, I wouldn't call it free healthcare, but they don't have to pay for healthcare. It's not universal healthcare, but as an employee for the city, you don't have to pay for your own healthcare. And I think you pay another like $80 a month for your family. So those are the kinds of things that could draw people to public service, and those hardworking men, and primarily women, some women, work in some of those positions. Because if you are if you grew up in a lower class, and as a man, you can walk in and pay the mortgage and provide the healthcare, I think that you could really, add to a family and stabilize things. And that's what we have to do when it comes to public work, is to let folks know that, hey, you might not make private sector money, but you can build a life and have a very good retirement on the other end of that life through this work. And if we can do that, we can have the folk boots on the ground. But right now, we're at a dangerous point of not having people, the actual talent and the hard work, because this is not easy work. This is, the wintertime when it's 10 degrees outside and you are waist deep in water trying to cut open a line of sewer or water to patch it and repair it and fix it. So that's what we need is that hard work and people who have a spirit of public service, because America wasn't built on corporate jobs. It was built on hardworking folks who have we're going to be on this continuum of struggle and progress, but the idea of America was something that drove people beyond what they pay or what the amenities of the positions provide or don't provide. And if we can get folks to fall back in love with the American spirit and fall back in love with this idea of America, I think that we can put ourselves in a better position than we're in today.
It does. Latest real, the state revolving fund, have you all had a chance to look at state revolving funds at all? A little bit?
Yeah, state revolving funds, here's the kicker with state revolving.
You ain't gonna me on this. Go ahead.
All right, so here's the kicker with state revolving loan fund. So the state puts some money in a pot. Let me give you an example. So let's say the state puts $100 million in this pot. The federal government matches that money, and then they turn around and loan it to local government at 1% or so, and then that 1% goes back in the pot. So imagine after so many years how big this pot is. If all your local governments are borrowing from the state revolving loan fund, but the state put in a little bit, the federal government plussed it up, and then that money is rolling over. And this is where you come with the back to the race and class conversation. Well, what communities borrow money and pay interest, and what communities borrow money, pay no interest, and what communities borrow money and get forgivable loans? So this is where we have a real hard conversation at the state level about the class issue, because when you spread out, who's getting what types of loans from the state revolving loan fund, yes, it's a cheap way to get money. So it is a benefit to the municipality or the county who is trying to make investments in their infrastructure and those things. But you're also paying interest, and some folks are getting forgivable loans. So now the interest paid from these communities are providing forgivable loans for these communities. So we got some deeper issues to work with the state revolving loan fund, but it's a good vehicle to use. But again, those opportunities to grow are going to have to be some hard conversations, primarily when it comes to this Build Back Better plan that the federal government's doing. So what I'm pushing now for all of my cities, I represent Jackson, Byram, Terry, Utica, Larned, and Raymond, and the unincorporated areas of Hinds County. So I'm pushing for our mayors and council people to not just take this Recovery Act money, go hire a contractor, and go fix X problem. I'm pushing them to rebuild the internal capacity of your public works departments. Buy your backhoes, get your dump trucks, get the equipment necessary that you're going to need, that's going to last you 20 years. It's going to last you, a long time. And then you take your internal money that you have from your water and your general fund money that goes to your public works departments, and you invest that in getting your salary lines up to a competitive place. And then you take care of the equipment you got, and you take care of your people, and you go kick butt, and you build an army to go fix your problem. Because when it comes to contracting, you're not gonna, because you're gonna pay 5-6 times the money to get the work done when you contract it all out, and you're going to get less work done. So that's what I'm pushing for now with our new resources that are coming down the pipe. And it's unpopular because the contractors want what? They want you to be in a situation where you have to continue to contract with them to get the meager work that you get done. They don't want you to have internal capacity at all, no matter if you're a white or black city. If you're majority white city, they want you to have as least capacity as possible so you can do more contracting. So the deeper fight is the corporations and the people. Those are the deeper fights. So I don't want y'all to leave this conversation just focus on race and not class, but also the fight from corporate America to the regular America. So we have some layers to our fight that we need good brain power like y'all to dive into to help us articulate these issues in a better way and find viable solutions to make progress in these issues.
Yeah. The thing with state revolving, I'll just add this to my challenge in part is when the policy is moving through DC, they use the same avenues and exits that they've always used. And so state revolving fund is one, when we're in those conversations, you would think there is no other way to get money to communities except state. That's the only thing they talk about. And people would like us to be creative and come up with other solutions and mechanisms, because a lot of the urban cities don't access those funds like we'd like them to be able to. Many are not in the position, bond rating wise or budget wise, to be able to really take advantage of loans and those types of things. We're a little better now in many of my cities because of the recovery monies that they were able to receive, and that's been most helpful. But the state revolving fund has to expand, and we need other avenues too that give us more of an express lane. If you think about it, in a grocery store, an express lane to our urban centers who need a lot of help, and they tend to have less staff, less staff to go through all that paperwork, all of the reporting that's required. All of those things matter too, that tend to be a challenge on the human resources in our city department. So I'll stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge, Simmone, but I go back to what I said in the beginning. Everybody in government, you do your job. Y'all ran, I was in the governor's office recently. I said, hey, your ass ran to be the governor, not me. Do your job. Your job is to be the governor. Your job is to be the governor's chief of staff. Your job is to do these different roles. If you're the mayor, I tell Shockway, do your job. You are the mayor. So what we have now is on the executive side of the house, we need mayors, governors, and the president. This is a time where the weight of the problems of America is sitting on the executive side of the house, because every legislature, even my legislature, if the governor called a special session today, we'd be there today to appropriate our COVID money. But our COVID money is sitting in Mississippi's bank collecting interest. We got $1.8 billion sitting in the bank, and we're not even in a special session. But who can call a special session? The governor. Legislature can't do it. Same thing at the local level. So right now, the mayors, the governors, and the presidents are sitting here pointing fingers and dilly-dallying with themselves, and they need to get their butts to work and really execute government, because they ran for those jobs, and they have to start executing government.
Let's say questions.
I know it's a little harsh. I'm sorry. And that's my soapbox right there.
I need to see the whole class as I do.
So what do you all
Did we recruit anybody into public service?
Dang, come on. Y'all can do it. Hey, but what I will say, for those who are looking at public service in politics, I would say no matter what side of the fence you land on, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, be free. I am truly blessed that I don't have to be the poster child Democrat or the Republican or the whatever. I can just look at my problems in my area that I represent, look at my role in solving those problems, and try to do the best I can in my role, and then affect other roles around me to solve problems. And I can do that because I'm free. I don't need lobbyists to pay my bills. I pay my own daggone bills. I got my own income. I got my own economy. I want the next generation of public servants to be able to choose who they work with, who they support, and what they do on your own, not be in a position where, I got to be the most staunchest this in order to maintain this platform. And it's on both sides, because what the system does, it finances you extreme left or extreme right. For me, whoever is right, whoever is correct, right? If you are correct in solving this problem, I'm going to sit down and, that's how I get along with everybody. because I don't start with what we disagree on. We got so many problems that we agree on. I go sit down with, white, black, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative. What do we agree on? And I get so busy working on what we agree on that I don't really, by the time, government's slow. So by the time you work through the issues you agree on, you won't have wasted all this time on issues you already know you disagree on. Like, if I already know we disagree on these things, just work on what we agree on and get work done. And that's what people want. They want people working together. They want people getting work done and doing things. The best government out there is the one you don't even see about in the news. Your garbage gets picked up, the streets gets repaved, but the narcissism that is in place nowadays in politics is really eroding the actual true public service of it all. And I just encourage those who want to be a part of public service to just do it for the spirit of the country and put yourself in a position where you can be free and you won't have to be if you choose to be the extreme left or the extreme right, that's your choice. And I want you to be free to make that choice, but not have to make that choice and maintain that. And it's not truly who you are as a person. There's so many elected officials. I got good friends out there who are basically broke without politics and then chained to whatever whatever horse they rode in on. And so, and for those of y'all who are looking at public service, I would say learn it, participate in it, and only jump in the game once you've got your economy in order. I'm blessed. I come from a family of farmers and ranchers, and so I'm an anomaly when it comes to this thing. But I just want the next generation to be able to build a family, enjoy your life, enjoy your family, raise your children, and then if you choose to be a public servant, you can be a better public servant because you're whole on the inside of yourself, and you're not having to, why would you get elected and then your child, you lose your own child or your own family in the process? It should be a growing part of your life and journey that your family can enjoy versus, that's how you get this negative stuff that happens. People get drugs, alcohol, those kinds of things. It's because of the foundation wasn't laid properly to serve effectively. I know I went off on a tangent, but I know we got a few minutes left to go. And I did hear that some folks were wanting to get involved in public service. And I wanted to say that before our time was up.
So we spent seems like kind of most of the conversation talking about folks that are working within structures and systems of government.
Mm-hmm.
But I know specifically I'm thinking about in Detroit, it was really a lot of activists that were able to call attention to and ultimately create a little bit of change. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about the role of activists in kind of water justice more broadly, and how you see that kind of balancing, work within government and within larger organizations.
Yeah, it'll drive the world. The activism drives the world. If you're not active in political circles, again, the way I explain, I'm probably oversimplifying, but I always say when you run for political office, you take an oath to that office. It's not to the masses of people who brought you there. And you have a commitment to sustaining that institution by balancing that budget. So upon being elected, you now have a different set of priorities in front of you. The thing that keeps you connected to the community is your heart, your pedigree, where you came from. And so if you didn't come from activism, you oftentimes see or view activists as hellraisers. They're always loud, they're always mad. If you come from activism, you tend to have a different empathetic ear that you're hearing from, and you're able to bring their voice to the table. But today, activism is key. I mean, that's what people respond to. Government, I found, and Representative Vance is so nice and sweet. That's why I take him with me, because he counters some of my vinegar sometimes, But right now we're in a time where folk are scared. Like politicians, they're not allowed to stand your ground, spine up politicians, not as many as we need, particularly as the crescendo of opposition gets louder and louder and louder. It can only be 20 people, but if they show up every day, all day, every day, all day, every day, all day, you'd be amazed what those 20 people can make a politician do, even though their district is demanding something totally different. So the in-your-face part of advocacy nowadays is new. And when I say new, reaching the Capitol, that's some stuff who does that? Who shows up at the governor's house with a gun? Like, who do that? On the front lawn, who do that? Who opened our state capitol? So we're in a different place with quote activists, that title. But I would say that activism is essential. If you are not acting or being an advocate, as I talked about Benton Harbor, they waited 3 years. They filed one petition overnight. Things start changing. Advocacy is what drives a lot of the attention, a lot of the budgets. And I can't overstate that I did it 20 years before I came from the streets into the suites. And so you probably still hear and see some of that in me, even inside the suites. It's important to have that, but the activists are running things, good, bad, and indifferent right now. They really are. So this is a fine time. Detroit is a whole different animal. You got Monica down there. You have Rhonda that's here. There's so many great activists there in Detroit, but we come from a history of owning the water. So Representative Stamps talked about where he comes from. He comes from a different kind of privilege. He's blessed, but Detroit as a city came from a different type of privilege. We owned the water, and then the suburbs bought it from us, and that was cool. It was cooler, but as the city got blacker, that got to be a challenge as well. And then as folk began to monetize our natural resources, we got to think about this. It's so important. I was worried when I saw things like bridges being privatized and parking in Chicago being privatized. And when they started with that, I knew it would be wrong before water. And so you start looking at water. One thing in Michigan, I always say, so goes democracy, so goes your water. The first thing they go after when they take your democracy away, Highland Park with an emergency manager, Detroit with an emergency manager, Flint with an emergency manager, Benton Harbor with an emergency. The first thing they went for is the water. Water is life. And so prior to making that a corporate entity or something that can make money off of, that's a problem. These authorities that we're putting in government, I hope you guys get a chance to look at authorities, they just have not proven to be great for people. These authorities take and they usurp the democracy process, and they put in this different sort of governance structure that you really can't go to and raise hell about, because they'll tell you, go talk to the mayor, and the mayor says, talk to the authority, and you're just like, what the heck?
Right.
And so you have to be mindful. Go ahead, Brett, please.
Yeah, you can't let these cities create these different boards. That's why I say, do your job. Don't get elected and go farm your job out and say, now you got to go talk to the authority. No, you appoint the members. So anything that's been created by government can get drawn back in. So those are the kinds of things that we have to work through. And then when I talked about the corporate versus public divide, where corporations are looking for more ways to make money to fuel the stock exchange or whatever shareholders they have to respond to. Well, the public sector got to fight back, because if you let the corporations drive local government, local government. I'm not talking about the federal government where the corporations drive the defense contracts, things like that. You're letting corporations, New York Stock Exchange-based corporations, drive your water, your local, ditches and drainage and local infrastructure. The corporations, I believe, are going too far, and they got plenty of money to fly folks around their private jets, and they go on these fishing trips, and they do all these different things. But it's very dangerous to the idea of America, because when the idea happened, there wasn't a corporate interest in place in 1775 trying to privatize your water. That's not a good place you want us to start going into, and we're already there. And it's going to take good people who believe in this idea to push back and say we can build a community without having it on the stock exchange where folks can buy stocks and shares and be expected to get dividends and returns every year. based on, that we can provide local government inside of ourselves to provide the basic needs of our communities.
I think too, for advocates, there's some things I'd like to see more of them have, and that would include, bring the emotion, absolutely, that advocacy brings, but bring the science, the data, the stats, the facts as well.
Well, Simmone, let me dive into this. I got roasted about 2 years ago. I mean, I got railed because I was running for public service commission at the time. And the Sierra Club got their whole team pissed off because I asked a simple question. I said, now, how do I run a farm with an electric tractor? Like, how do I do that? Explain to me how I can. We were talking about the Green New Deal. And I said, in concept, it's a good deal. But how do you do it? Can you give me a program of we're an agriculture state. So how do I run a farm without a tractor? To me, it was a basic question. I didn't think real deep into it. I just happened to be in a forum like this where it was a lot of people watching and they put the question to me. And I said, well, how do you run a farm without a tractor? And that spilled into, it spawned a whole lot of other reverberating effects. I'm not an expert politician. I didn't know to not ask simple questions that people didn't have answers to on big stages. It was just a simple question. So the activists need to do more than just bring the emotion in the fight, but bring the how do I do it? How much is it going to cost? And how do I transition to that? What does it look like? And then let me agree on it. But don't just say, rah, 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 you have to agree. Well, as an elected official, I got to turn around and say, okay, well, how do I do it? Like, what's the plan? Once I agree, what is it going to cost? What's the transition plan to be able to move forward? And so that's what I would say back to the activist community is to piggyback on what Simmone said. The science and data is important, but the logistics, how you gonna do it? That's why Simmone's a great logistical person of how do you do it? And whatever you're being active or protesting about, at least come forward with an idea of what it's gonna cost and how to do it. And not just, protest to do it, which that's important. But how to do it is important as well. And one last thing about advocacy, it's no mistake that the work that the National Wildlife Federation has done and we've done, and they've partnered with us through WNPR and other media outlets. The president, when he gave his speech about the Build Back Better plan, he even said in the speech, we can allow for situations like what happened in Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Mississippi, to ever happen again. Now, somebody had to write that in the speech for him to say that. So it took advocacy to get all of that there. Somebody had to rattle the can and ring the bell. And so, but once you ring the bell, it took the other side of the spectrum saying, okay, well, this is what we need. This is what's going to solve the problem. This is what it's going to cost to get that inserted in the president's speech and inserted inside of the policy and in the legislation. So that's my little 2 cents on that part.
Okay, so my question is on messaging. So both of you talked about like working with the other side, and I was curious, what type of messaging have you found that actually resonates with them? And I should say, any advice on any of that?
I will turn it over to the representative. What resonates with your Republican friends, and how are you able to get legislation passed as a Dem? You were one of the first, right?
Ma'am?
Can you get some legislation passed?
Yeah. I mean, so again, I start with what we agree on. So it may not be packaged as some big conservation program, but if I change the packaging around and say, well, you know what, this is gonna create this many jobs, it's gonna stabilize this much community, it's going to stabilize this many homes and residents and provide this quality of life for folks in this area. It's gonna open up, more economy. It's about how you package it, and then your relationship with folks, because politics is about three things. First, it's about power, relationships, and resources. And I learned this. My first duty station when I got in the Marine Corps was on Marine One. I flew around the little green helicopter you see the president flying in. Well, I flew on that for the first 3 years of my military life. And while I couldn't say anything, you stand there, your ears and eyes still work. And it doesn't matter if you're in Washington, D.C. or in the city hall in Jackson, Mississippi. It's all the same thing. And these folks are about just as smart as you. They're not really super brain power folks here. And it boils down to power, relationships, and resources. And if you can navigate those three things, how do I build more power? How do I build more relationships? And how do I build better resources or acquire more resources? If you can package it with those things in mind, it doesn't matter who you talk to. You can have an open ear and be able to get some things done at every level of government. But you need all of the people who, everybody can't be the deliverer of the message.
Yes. That's right.
So while, let me give you an example. So during the 60s, a lot of people thought that Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Huey Newton, and at times were warring with each other. But somebody had to tote the water. Somebody had to be the person to go to the White House and sit down with the president. And that was Martin Luther King. Even though Malcolm X and Huey Newton and Stokely Carmichael may have vilified him in some areas, and they may have been warring, but somebody got to tote the water. Just like during the Trump administration, everybody was looking for every Black conservative you can find. Please go tote this water for my community. So how you get things done on both sides is, first, be honest, be genuine, don't lie, and be true to what your role is. And every time I've walked into somebody's office as a Black Democrat in Mississippi, I sat down with our Speaker of the House 6 years ago. And we were talking about our area to stabilize part of our city and how we needed money from the state. And I said, well, Mr. Speaker, and I prepared this and I practiced with my mayor. At the time, it was Tony Yarber. And we were asking for a $11 million a year investment over 20 years for $220 million to stabilize the core of our city, where state property is. The state doesn't pay any taxes for their property. So we got a big chunk of our city that we don't get any tax revenue from, but we provide services and we provide infrastructure and fire protection, police protection, all that. And I told him, I said, well, if you don't give this to the mayor, then I'm gonna start laying off police officers. So it's up to you, Mr. Speaker. But you have to kind of practice those things of, if he says this, we're going to do this, and you have to really role play this thing out and quarterback it before you get in the room. Because once you get in those rooms and you're having to negotiate with the people who have the ability to make it happen, you gotta paint a picture. And if you feel it going south, you got to pull out your things to make it go back in the direction you want it to go. So we were able to do it, and we got a commitment, and it's been going well for the state to spend $220 million in the city of Jackson where it has property. So then when the city could take its resources and spend it in the underserved areas, and that's the fight now. The city has been getting the money every year for this area where the capital is, but it's been taking money from other areas and still investing it in these areas and not addressing problems in the outlying areas. So again, the way you get things done is by making sure you got somebody who's respected on both sides to be the messenger, and then have a good plan in place for what you're asking for, not just, hey, I need, $60 million. I need, anybody can put something on a piece of paper, but it has to be real, and it have to be something that's a worthwhile investment. And it's a long answer to a short question.
Well, no, that's what, you're so nice about that, you know me, they hard, it's hard. The representative is right, that's how you do it, I just don't, it's hard right now. On the Hill, some won't even talk to each other, staffers won't talk, it is, I haven't seen it.
Oh, Simmone, let me bring up one more thing. But so we have to agree that every level of government is built for corruption.
No.
It's built that way fundamentally, unless good people step in. And right now in Washington, D.C., if they don't fix gerrymandering, you won't have people who have to balance themselves out politically. If we can fix gerrymandering, you change our whole political structure. You don't have blue areas. You don't have folks on the Democratic side who have to go home and answer to Republicans because they're not in my district. You don't have folks who are Republicans who have to answer to not one Democrat. So they can be as extreme as they want to be without ever having to come to the middle because of gerrymandering. And right now, during the moment we just did the census, if we double down on the extreme gerrymandering that's at the federal, state, county, and local government, again, we're going to further polarize America. We have to tackle gerrymandering, so people will have to go out and court voters and answer to voters who are not in their socioeconomic class, who are not in their race, or not in their party. Unless we fix that, you might as well sit back and buckle your seatbelt for the rockiest time of American politics that you've ever seen if we don't fix gerrymandering this time.
I agree with you, gerrymandering and voting rights. These things are killing us, where the legislatures can overturn what the voters, the will of the voters. If we don't get voting rights and it's gerrymandering, democracy, I say it's fragile, it's very fragile right now.
Right.
So we are unfortunately gonna have to stop now because there's another discussion about the community. 60 seconds for this class. But this is an awesome conversation. Representative Stantz, thank you so much. It's a really provocative, intriguing, informative. You too. Thank you so much.
Now, let me just end on one thing. I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to even come here today to participate with y'all. I'm the only DeKeither on the planet. When you Google me, you just get me. So if anybody wants to reach out, you can feel free to.
I did that. You really are the DeKeither.
I'm the only one. I don't know what kind of medication they gave my mom in the hospital, but that's all she came up with was DeKeither. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm on all the social media stuff. Y'all can find me.
Great, thank you, Rev, appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, so Thursday,